So the Native American Humane Society is the only national organization dedicated to supporting tribes and their communities in developing their own animal services. In this first year, we have been working in tribal communities. And what I would like to do is to just step back from this organization and explain to you why it's needed. Because genocide didn't just happen to the two-leggeds, it happened to the four-leggeds, it happened to all of our relations. And the consequence of that is still being experienced. And tribal governments typically don't have the resources to address animal welfare within their own communities because the resources are so limited. Those that are provided by the federal government to manifest the federal government's trust responsibility for tribes tend to focus on public health, public safety, public education, public housing, and justice, such as it is. Now, I'm sure many of you are thinking, yeah, but animals exist right at the intersection of all of those things. I think everybody in this room understands that. Unfortunately, the federal government does not. And every tribe is different. Every tribal nation, every tribal land is different. But typically, broadly speaking, you cannot impose taxes on federal land, and reservations are primarily made up of federal land, meaning that tribal governments, who are the sovereign nations responsible for their jurisdictions providing services to their communities, don't have the same capacity as the county or the city next door to impose taxes, which is what funds animal services. So what happens is that very well-meaning outsiders who are dedicated to animal welfare observe free-roaming animals in these communities. They observe tribal families caring for their animals differently, and through their own experience, through their lens, often racist, make assumptions about those animals and those families and the capacities of those tribes to care for their animals, not understanding how tribes live, why they live that way, and what's possible. And so there is a phenomenon, unfortunately, that is developed that's extraordinarily damaging, even if well-intended, of folks who I think intend to be allies, parachuting into communities and doing whatever they want, basically, for the animals, right? Because they feel like, well, what we need is spay-neuter. And so we're gonna come in and we're gonna do spay-neuter. That's a very transactional thing that over time, while it can be very beneficial in that moment, the legacy of that is to really insert themselves in a profound way that creates a wedge between the tribal government and their own animals. It's a kind of learned helplessness. And so that is why the Native American Humane Society exists, to recenter that decision making, to recenter those discussions within tribal communities themselves, so that tribes and their families and their community leaders have the support they need, the safe space they want to determine among all of their priorities, which are many, where do animal services and welfare fit in, and what makes the most sense for them, and what should that look like based upon not only their circumstance today, but the relationship that they've had with their four-legged relations since the beginning of time. And because tribes are experts in how to manage their own communities, their own land, their own animals. And so I think we also, the Native American Humane Society also exists as a bridge between tribal communities and non-tribal partners, potential allies and resources, right? It's obvious that I'm white passing, but I'm also enrolled. I'm an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation. My husband, who's here with me today, like Dr. Yellowbird, is an enrolled member of the 3 affiliated tribes of Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara. And my son is Native, all my in-laws are Native. And sometimes what we need are organizations who can bridge, right, both sides of that river. And people like me, right, raised white, love Indian, right? And so I know that we're here, we have our last 3 minutes, and I see your hand up. I just want to say that less than 1% of all veterinarians are Native Americans, and we have to change that. That is a real driving factor in all of this. And so what we have developed a brand new humane education curriculum for kids K through 5 that is it's been developed by natives for natives, and it's being implemented in tribal schools in Northern California, Pomo schools right now. Because what we want to do is to help native kids who are the single greatest victims of dog bites in this country. Of all Americans, they experience dog bites at dramatically higher rates than anybody else. So we want to help them learn how to decode behavior of animals, be safer, right? We also want them to be more successful pet owners, introduce them to veterinary science at the earliest age so that they can pursue that pathway if that's something that speaks to their heart. But if you never see a veterinarian, and many dogs and cats and all other animals in tribal communities never ever meet a veterinarian, and neither do the kids who love those animals. So they don't know to want to be a veterinarian if they've never seen a veterinarian, right? So we are also working to develop access to veterinary care. We're specifically right now working in community with the Seneca Nation in upstate New York, with the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa in North Dakota, with the Northern Arapaho on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming, with the Utah Navajo chapters on the Navajo Nation, and with Pomo tribes in Northern California. And we welcome the opportunity to visit other tribal nations and to be in community. And I just have to say, this is how committed we are. Our Director of Operations, who is, like all of us at the Native American Humane Society, an enrolled member of a federally recognized tribe. Her name's Serena Steiner. She's Dene. And she has spent this entire year sleeping on top of her car, camping with her dog to live in community with tribal communities, because you have to show up and stay and be there, right? You can't just parachute in and out. And the last thing I want to say, and I don't want to go negative, but here I go, and please forgive me, right? I think that there's been a lot of news about boarding schools and the incredible trauma that they've created. And I think it has very much gone out of fashion to steal Native kids. But it's still absolutely permissible to steal Native animals. Stealing is when you come into a tribal community and you see dogs gathered around outside of the grocery store or maybe the gas station or the hotel. And one just really pulls at your heartstrings, one in particular, and you take it upon yourself to take that animal because you believe that you know best for that animal, and you've not asked anybody else about that animal, and you just assume that that animal is going to be better off anywhere else than there. I think what that probably is not only compassion but unchecked racism. So the Native American Humane Society is no different than any other organization. We have no right to go into any tribal reservation and do anything. It's none of our business unless we have presented ourselves to their tribal council and received explicit approval to work within their community, and that is what we do. We have a memorandum of understanding or agreement with every tribe with whom we work, and we don't work in community unless and until we get that. So our first conversation is always with tribal leadership, and none of us can be or should be in too much of a hurry to skip that step, because to do so, no matter how well intended you are, no matter how many dogs you see roaming on the streets, and no matter how worried you are about that, to go in and do that without the tribe's permission is to undermine their sovereignty, which is a far greater harm than that dog wandering around a few more days. Only the Native families know which ones are truly unwanted. None of us know that. We can't possibly know that.